Chapter 4, The Life of the Spirit. The three preceding lectures have touched upon certain fundamental truths in a definite order. First, the nature of the originating spirit itself. Next, the generic relation of the individual to this all-embracing spirit. And lastly, the way to specialize this relation so as to obtain greater results from it than spontaneously arise by its mere generic action. And we have found that this can only be done through a new order of thought. This sequence is logical because it implies a power, an individual who understands the power, and a method of applying the power deduced from understanding its nature. These are general principles without realizing which it would be impossible to proceed further. But assuming that the reader has grasped their significance, we may now go on to consider their application in greater detail. Now this application must be a personal one, for it is only through the individual that the higher specialization of the power can take place. But at the same time, this must not lead us to suppose that the individual himself brings the creative force into being. To suppose this is inversion, and we cannot impress upon ourselves too deeply that the relation of the individual to the divine spirit is that of a distributor, and not that of the original creator. If this is a steadily borne in mind, the way will become clear, otherwise we shall be led into confusion. What then is the power which we are to distribute? It is the originating spirit itself. We are sure that it is this because the new order of thought always begins at the beginning of any series which it contemplates bringing into manifestation. And it is based upon the fact that the origin of everything is spirit. It is in this that its creative power resides. Hence the person who is in the true new order of thought assumes an axiomatic fact that what he has to distribute or differentiate into manifestation is nothing else than the originating spirit. This being the case, it is evident that the purpose of the distribution must be the more perfect expression of the originating spirit, as that which it is in itself. And what it is in itself is emphatically life. What is seeking for expression, then, is the perfect livingness of the spirit. And this expression is to be found through ourselves by means of our renewed mode of thought. Let us see, then, how our new order of thought, with regard to the principle of life, is likely to operate in our old order of thought, that we have associated life with the physical body. Life has been for us the supreme physical fact. Now, however, we know that life is much more than this. But as the greater includes the less, it includes physical life as one mode of its manifestation. The true order does not require us to deny the reality of physical life or to call it an illusion. On the contrary, it sees in physical life the completion of the great creative series, but it assigns it the proper place in the series, which is what the old mode of thought did not. When we realize the truth about the creative process, we see that the originating life is not physical. Its livingness consists in thought and feeling. By this inner movement it throws out vehicles through which to function, and these become living forms because of the inner principle which is sustaining them. So that the life with which we are primarily concerned in the new order is the life of thought and feelings in ourselves as the vehicle, or distributing medium, of the life of the Spirit. Then, if we have grasped the idea of the Spirit as the great forming power, as stated in the last lecture, we shall seek in it the fountainhead of form as well as power. And as a logical deduction from this, we shall look into to give form to our thoughts and feelings. If the principle is once recognized, the sequence is obvious. The form taken by our outward conditions, whether of body or circumstance, depends on the form taken by our thoughts and feelings. And our thoughts and feelings will take form from that source from which we allow them to receive suggestions. Accordingly, if we allow them to accept their fundamental suggestions from the relative and limited, they will assume a corresponding form and transmit them to our external environment, thus repeating the old order of limitation in a ceaselessly recurring round. Now our object is to get out of this circle of limitation, and the only way to do it is to get our thoughts and feelings molded into new forms, continually advancing to greater and greater perfection. To meet this requirement, therefore, there must be a forming power greater than that of our own unaided conceptions. And this is to be found in our realization of the Spirit as the supreme beauty or wisdom, molding our thoughts and feelings into shapes harmoniously adjusted to the fullest expression, in and through us, of the livingness which Spirit is in itself. Now this is nothing more than transferring to the innermost plane of origination a principle with which all our readers who are in the thought may presume to be quite familiar, the principle of receptiveness. We all know what is meant by a receptive mental attitude when applied to healing or telepathy, and does it not logically follow that the same principle may be applied to the receiving of life itself from the Supreme Source? What is wanted, therefore, is to place ourselves in a receptive mental attitude towards the Universal Spirit, with the intention of receiving its forming influence into our mental substance. It is always the presence of a definite intention that distinguishes the intelligent receptive attitude of mind from a mere sponge-like absorbency, which sucks in any and every influence that may happen to be floating around. For we must not shut our eyes to the fact that there are various influences in the mental atmosphere by which we are surrounded, and some of them of the most undesirable kind. Clear and definite intention is therefore a necessity in our receptive attitude as in our active and creative one. And if our intention is to have our own thoughts and feelings molded into such forms as to express those of the Spirit, then we establish that relation to the Spirit which, by the conditions of the case, must necessarily lead us to the conception of new ideals vitalized by a power which will enable us to bring them into concrete manifestation. It is in this way that we become differentiating centers of the divine thought, giving it expression and form in the world of space and time, and thus is solved the great problem of enabling the universal to act upon the plane of the particular without being hampered by those limitations which the merely generic law of manifestation imposes upon it. It is just here that subconscious mind performs the function of a bridge between the finite and the infinite, as noted in my Edinburgh lectures. And it is for this reason that a recognition of its susceptibility to impression is so important. By establishing then a personal relation to the life of the Spirit, the sphere of the individual becomes enlarged. The reason is that he allows a greater intelligence than his own to take the initiative. And since he knows that this intelligence is also the very principle of life itself, he cannot have any fear that it will act in any way to diminish his individual life, for that would be to stultify its own operation. It would be self-destructive action, which is a contradiction in terms to the conception of creative spirit. Knowing then that by its inherent nature this intelligence can only work to the expansion of the individual life, we can rest upon it with the utmost confidence and trust it to take an initiative which will lead to far greater results than any we could forecast from the standpoint of our own knowledge. So long as we insist on dictating the particular form which the action of the Spirit is to take, we limit it, and so close against ourselves avenues of expansion which might otherwise have been open to us. And if we ask ourselves why we do this, we shall find that in the last resort it is because we do not believe in the Spirit as a forming power. We have indeed advanced to the conception of it as an executive power, which will work to a prescribed pattern, but we have yet to grasp the conception of it as versed in the art of design and capable of elaborating schemes of construction, which will not only be complete in themselves, but also in perfect harmony with one another. When we advance to the conception of the Spirit as containing in itself the ideal of form as well as power, we shall cease from the effort of trying to force things into a particular shape, whether on the inner or outer plane, and shall be content to trust the inherent harmoniousness or beauty of the Spirit to produce combinations far in advance of anything that we could have conceived ourselves. This does not mean that we shall reduce ourselves to a condition of apathy, in which all desire, expectation, and enthusiasm have been quenched, for these are the mainspring of our mental machinery. But on the contrary, their action will be quickened by the knowledge that there is working at the back of them a formative principle, so infallible that it cannot miss its mark, so that however good and beautiful the existing forms may be, we may always rest in the happy expectation of something still better to come. And it will come by a natural law of growth, because the Spirit is in itself the principle of increase. They will grow out of present conditions for the simple reason that if you are to reach some further point, it can only be by starting from where you are now. Therefore it is written, "Despise not the day of small things." There is only one proviso attached to this forward movement of the Spirit in the world of our own surroundings, and that is that we shall cooperate with it. And this cooperation consists in making the best use of existing conditions in cheerful reliance on the Spirit of increase to express itself through us and for us, because we are in harmony with it. This mental anxiety will be found of immense value in setting us free from worry and anxiety, and as a consequence, our work will be done in a much more efficient manner. We shall do the present work for its own sake, knowing that herein is the principle of unfoldment, and doing it simply for its own sake, we shall bring to bear upon it a power of concentration which cannot fail of good results. And this quite naturally and without any toilsome effort. We shall then find that the secret of cooperation is to have faith in ourselves because we first have faith in God. And we shall discover that this divine self-confidence is something very different from a boastful egotism which assumes a personal superiority over others. It is simply the assurance of a man who knows that he is working in accordance with the law of nature. He does not claim as a personal achievement what the law does for him. But on the other hand, he does not trouble himself about outcries against his presumptuous audacity raised by persons who are ignorant of the law which he is employing. He is therefore neither boastful nor timorous, but simply works on in cheerful expectancy, because he knows that his reliance is upon a law which cannot be broken. In this way, then, we must realize the life of the Spirit as being also the law of the Spirit. The two are identical and cannot deny themselves. Our recognition of them gives them a new starting point through our own mentality, but they still continue to be the same in their nature, and unless limited or inverted by our own mental affirmation of limited or inverted conditions, they are bound to work out into fuller and continually fuller expression of the life, love, and beauty which is the Spirit in itself. Our path, therefore, is plain. It is simply to contemplate the life, love, and beauty of the originating Spirit, and affirm that we are already giving expression to it in our own thoughts, and in our own actions, however insignificant they may be at present. This path may be very narrow and humble in its beginning, but it ever grows wider and mounts higher, for it is the continually expanding expression of the life of the Spirit which is infinite and knows no limits. End of chapter.